Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is the Ukraine war news update for the 28th of February 2023. I am just about able to do this. I have just let you know I've got multiple sclerosis and my feet decided to do something different to the rest of my body last night and I fell flat on my face and I've just got to go off for an X-ray soon, so I might not be able to do my um a map update. We'll see how it goes, or it might be just a little bit late. I'm using my left hand today because my right arm is a bit buggered, but that's life, eh? So let's go to our usual opening gambit, which is the Ukrainian figures for the Russian losses for the day before. Usual caveats, inaccurate propaganda. Russia don't produce the same. All the usual caveats for all my claims today. Please take everything with a pinch of salt. Please check your sources, check me, check the sources I use, so on and so forth. But this appears to be what's going on. Uh, uh, at least with most of what I say, there might be some elbow room with these figures, although I am finding them quite accurate at the moment, at least indicatively accurate. So what's happened yesterday? Well, 550 liquidated personnel. This is again hasn't. We've had 3 days now of much lower stats, and we can expect that the weekend, but that's kept going for today, which is Tuesday. So I don't know what that says other than, well, I do know what it says to me. My conclusion is that it's quiet on those fronts. I think from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kremna, we have seen a much quieter front line for the last few days. Bakhmut is obviously still raging. Mariinka seems to be fairly tasty at the moment and a little bit so in Vuhledar as well, but maybe Avdivka slightly less than it has been. But certainly that northern sector is quiet, and I think this is reflected in the figures here. 3 tanks, 9 APCs, this 3 artillery systems, 3 MLRS. We have no aircraft noted, but there is one big aircraft that's been lost, and I don't know whether they will include that on here because it was in Belarus, sorry, and done at the hands of sort of partisans. Drones, 3 drones, 4 vehicles, and fuel tanks. So fairly low across the board. 3 MLRS will be quite useful. Uh, let's go on and have a look at losses and hits as well in our section for the beginning here, just to give you an indication of the sorts of losses that have taken place that have been fully verified by open source intelligence. These are visual confirmations, so these have definitely been lost. You look at the difference between the Russian and the Ukrainian figures in terms of tanks, AFVs, and IFVs. So there have been huge losses for the Russians in those areas. Self-propelled artillery, proportionally quite a big difference, and MLRS as well. I'm going to look at these stats in a little bit more depth in an extra either today or tomorrow. And we'll move on to what took place in Belarus. So, an attack on an A-50U was reportedly carried out using 2 drones that were fitted with explosives. Belarusian security forces are said to have discovered a bag filled with drone control panels. So, what has happened here? Well, oops, sorry, left hand, nice. We have a 200. This is Telegraph saying Putin's 274 million pound spy plane. So I think it's $330 million. Blown up by Belarusian partisans. A Russian spy plane worth 271 million pounds was severely damaged by partisans in Belarus. The A-50 aircraft, which is used to identify the track targets for military operations, was rendered non-operational after local resistance members used drones to drop explosives on it, according to reports. Bipol, a group of Belarusian security officials who resigned in protest against the brutal crushing of anti-regime protests in 2020, claimed the attack. And Yuri Ignat, a spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force, on Monday hailed the attack as excellent news, adding that the A-50 was one of the reconnaissance planes that Russia has been using to locate Ukrainian missile defense during drone attacks. It was hit in 2 places. I believe possibly is it the front? Here we go. It was damaged. It doesn't give the exact details there. But those 2 circles are where the damage took place. Here we go. Belarusian partisans are claiming to have attacked Machilushki Air Base in central Belarus earlier today, in which two explosions caused severe damage to the radar antenna and front sections of the A-50U mainstay airborne early warning control aircraft of the Russian Air Force. The UK intelligence update today deals explicitly with that. On the 19th of January 2023, amateur aircraft spotters observed a Russian A-50 mainstay airborne early warning system accompanied by two MiG-31K Foxhound fighters departing from Machilushki Air Base, Belarus, participating in joint Russian-Belarusian air drills between the 16th of January and the 1st of February. On the 26th of February, Belarusian partisans group Bipol and exiled opposition leaders reported an A-50 mainstay had sustained damage from drones, drone attacks on the airbase. Bipol reported two explosions and damage to the front and middle sections of the A-50 mainstay, as well as the radar antenna. So actually, that's now saying sort of front and middle and radar. The A-50 mainstay is a Russian airborne early warning control platform. Its role is to build a recognized air picture and to provide coordination to adjoining fighter aircraft. The attribution and damage has not been officially corroborated. However, the loss of the A-50 mainstay would be significant as it is critical to Russian air operations for providing an air battle space picture. This will likely leave 6 operational A-50s in service, further constraining Russian air operations. So the very varying figures here. No one's quite sure how many of these A-50s are operational in Russia. I think they've maybe got 20 of them in Russia. Russia's a huge country, but also those 20 are almost definitely not operational themselves. They've sold a load of these on to other countries. It's thought that maybe 6 or 7 of these are still operational, and so one being taken out of operation does have quite a critical impact on the radar capability of the Russians and being able to spot air defenses. I mean, this is really useful as a kind of seed operation for the Ukrainians, a suppression of enemy air defense. This is the way that Russia has of spotting Ukrainian air defense to take them out of the picture with drones or aircraft and whatnot. So to take this craft out of the picture is really, really important, and I think is a really useful thing for the Belarusians to have done on behalf of the Ukrainians there. Within just an hour, 3 unmanned aerial vehicles crashed in Belgrade. So this is an oblast. This is a city in its eponymous oblast in Russia, Western Russia. Whether those were Ukrainian drones is unclear at this point. I think it's almost certainly the case. In fact, some of the blocks of explosives appear to be British provided explosives on one of the drones. There's video footage of one going over as well. I'll see if I can find that. So here it is. This is the drone going over Belgorod. One of them, one of the 3. And in fact, there's evidence. Yeah, I think this is the explosives on one of them. Those white explosives there, I think, are British provided. P8, PE8. So yeah, there you go. That's some drone. I don't know. My guess is that they were taken out by electronic warfare and sort of dropped out the sky without doing what they were intending to do. But it kind of keeps everyone in Belgrade on the edge, keeps the Russian air defenses pretty much on their toes. Here, a similar situation, but with more success. This has taken place in Tuapse, which is about 440 kilometers from the front line in Ukraine. So let's have a look at the location of this. It's down there. The front line is somewhere up here. So to get drones from there to there and for them to do their business is pretty good. Russian media reports that around 2 a.m. on February 28th, 2 drones with explosives attacked the Rosneft oil depot near the city of Tuapse. Distance to the territory controlled is about 430 plus kilometers. And then we have, I don't know that it's hit anything that would give the Russians a serious headache, as in there doesn't look like the actual oil depot or refinery itself was hit, just maybe somewhere around it. But still, again, keeps the Russians on their toes, gets them to maybe move around air defenses from one place to the other, therefore leaving a weakness somewhere else. And this was the theory about. So yeah, it's damaged a building of a boiler house next to an oil storage. Uh, After the explosion, two craters with a depth of 1.5 meters remain. So quite sizable drone explosions. I was talking about the other day how the Russians have let the Ukrainians know. Sorry, the Ukrainians have let the Russians know uh, about future counteroffensives taking place inside. They're going to plan on hitting places inside Russia. Well, the point of that is to get Russia to move their defenses around, take them from one place and move them to another. And of course, that then would leave them weak somewhere else, one would assume. So there is a utility for letting the Russians know of future intentions. Zelensky, allies need to move past the aviation taboo. During his evening address on the 27th, Zelensky said that the country's allies need to move past their taboo in supplying aircraft to Ukraine. Critics argue that allies' reluctance to supply F-16 Typhoon and Dassault uh, fighter jets and long-range ATACMS missiles to Ukraine will prevent Kyiv from launching a counteroffensive and liberating the rest of Ukrainian territory. This is really laying it on the line, saying, look, we're not going to succeed. Our counteroffensives aren't going to work unless you do this. It's really trying to twist the arms of allies to give at least long-range ordnance. But as you can see here, hopefully aircraft as well. I don't know whether that will work, however. And big explosions in occupied Horlivka right now. This is a occupied city behind sort of Donetsk, I think somewhere around Donetsk and Luhansk. And there have been further, one would assume, HIMARS hits. HIMARS are active, remember, all the time, or every night it seems. And although I don't always report on them, they are doing their thing. Right, let's move on to other things. I just want to mention Bakhmut. If I don't have a chance to do the frontline update, I talked about there being possibly being a counterattack, but it wasn't confirmed. It all looked a bit rumory. Turns out it was. It appears a big rumor. I do wonder about what the utility of spreading misinformation like that is, unless it is Russians doing that. But again, I'm not quite sure what is gained from anyone. So it leads me to believe there probably might have been some kind of counterattack that was just blown out of all proportion, and a small kind of nugget, a kernel of truth, then exploded into some big claim as a kind of telephone game takes place. But yeah, either way, I'm not. It appears that that has not been confirmed, and that big Ukrainian counterattack in Bakhmut that I said might have happened has not happened. Uh, but this is Dmitry, War Translated, doing a translation of Alexei Arestovich, who was a former spokesperson for the Ukrainian government, now does it on a daily basis just off his own back. He said in Bakhmut, and I think it's worth just having a look at this, the situation has deteriorated north of the city and the Russians have advanced. There are dozens of attacks every day. However, the Ukrainians continue to perform counterattacks and the situation is prone to change. The situation is very difficult but under control. The supply and rotation of the Ukrainian units continue, as does intense street fighting. Even if Bakhmut was abandoned, this would not be the end of the world. It would simply mean that Ukrainian forces chose to retreat to more defensible positions. This does not have long-term implications, as the Ukrainians also retreated from Izium and Kherson after defending them. And who do those cities belong to now? The main objective of defending is to exhaust the enemy and drain his offensive capabilities. An adversary that retains offensive capabilities cannot be attacked, and Ukraine cannot launch its offensive while Russia still is able to attack. Bakhmut and Soledar are doing just that, exhausting Russian offensive capability. This it appears to be, you know, a very clear exposition of the intentions of the Ukrainians in Bakhmut and the calculation that is being made there. The ratio of losses, he says, there is roughly 1-7 in Ukraine's favor. Of course, I can't verify that, but that is, if that is true, then you can see how worthwhile Bakhmut is for exhausting future Russian capacity and capability of attack. Their ability to attack is being degraded going forward. The Russians do not have enough artillery and tanks and shells for these platforms. Um, and he goes on to say the state of the Russian army. Russian losses increased significantly in October when they switched from vehicle-centered operations to manpower-centered as a result of vehicle losses. So this is huge, and it goes back to that chart I showed you of the huge number of tanks, IFVs, AFVs that they have lost. In order to advance in Bakhmut, the Russian army has to reduce operations along the rest of the front. The world's second army can barely sustain offensive operations on a 40-kilometer sector of a nearly 1,500-kilometer front with massive casualties. So when we look at 550 people being liquidated, which is still above average, but is a downtick from previous weeks, we can only kind of surmise that the front line is quieter because they are exhausting themselves in certain places. Even if the Russians manage to take Bakhmut, they will face the exact same situation again in Chasiv Yar and beyond. Do they think the Ukraine and the West will sit idly by while they slowly advance? Where is the much discussed upcoming Russian offensive? And actually, it's worth continuing this next little bit here, which is another third. Sorry, it was a myth inflated by Russian propaganda. Russian force structure currently, a quarter to half of all Russian forces at the front are composed of mobilized light infantry with no heavy weapons and only sometimes motorized in trucks along with minimal infantry equipment. Another third is composed of Russian army units replenished with mobilized personnel, 40 to 60% mobilized. These units are more or less equipped with weapons and vehicles, but to a lesser extent than at the beginning of the war. The remaining quarter to third is made up of Wagner PMC. Their objectives vary from sector to sector. The unequipped light infantry is often used to draw fire during an assault. So I think that's it was really worth sort of dwelling on there. Uh, when we see probably, I would imagine the fall of Bakhmut within the next week, maybe if that happens, and it wouldn't surprise me. Uh, you you will know that it's done its job in attriting the Russian forces really quite significantly. And if it doesn't fall, then it will continue to do that. Um, Russia on fire. This evening's chapter comes from a metro station in Moscow. Heavy smoke fills the Sportivnaya metro station. Some passengers require medical attention for smoke inhalation. And this, behold, Lieutenant General Alexander Matovnikov, Deputy Commander in Chief of Russian Land Forces and, quote, hero of Russia, that they are the likes of the Russian army. But what is actually more interesting is who and why somebody dropped the compromat. I smell a Prigozhin. So, what is going on here? We have this super important Russian military leader doing a bit of a naked dance, and that's on camera and that has been leaked. And the question is, why would that be leaked, and who is seeking to gain? Probably someone like indeed Prigozhin, um, or goodness knows. So this has got out. Don't know what the ramifications of this will be, but it's not going to be good. On the other side of the coin, Zelensky has fired a top Ukrainian military commander. No one really knows why. Dismissal of Major General Eduard Mikhailovich Moskalov, who has served in the role overseeing battles in the Donbass region since last March, and is the latest in a series of Ukrainian leadership changes since the Russian military invasion began in February. Several high-profile Ukrainian officials were fired or resigned last month as Zelensky moved to contain allegations of corruption. But it's not immediately clear why Zelensky fired Moskalyov, as no reason was given in that one-line decree that was published on the Ukrainian president's official website. So one would assume this is a case of ensuring that the Ukrainian military is free of corruption, but it could also be bad decision making. He has done that before, and in fact, Zaluzhny has indicated that he's done that rather a lot, which is to get if they're not up to the job, move them on. Uh, and in fact, there's something said about that to a degree in a second. Here we have the exhumations in war graveyards in Izium have been completed, revealing the bodies of 194 males, 215 females, 22 military bodies of those. So most of these are civilian casualties, 5 babies, and 11 unidentified people. Bodies and hands tied, limbs missing, head or chest injuries, genitals missing, stab and bullet wounds. So this will be just another example of war crimes, this time in Izium. Those war crime statistics keep going up. They're at 71,500 odd cases at the moment. That's a huge number. Again, the question is, are you on the right side? Pro Russians, pro Kremlin, voices. Are you on the right side? I don't think so. Okay, a bit of geopolitics, not much. The Belgian Ministry of Finance reported it had frozen Russian assets worth 58 billion. In fact, this should be in my uh, military and financial aid section, but oh well. 58 billion euros in a year, and has also blocked Russian financial transactions in the amount of 191 billion euros. This is the highest figure among all EU countries. Well done, Belgium. And I'm going to come back to that because actually I've got a newspaper article that gives a bit more detail of that. That was in the wrong place. Do apologise. The EU has extended sanctions against Belarus for another year. Again, this should be in the other section. I don't know what I'm doing. My brain's obviously somewhere else. Corresponding statement was published on the website of the European Council. So Belarus still in trouble with aligning itself with Russia, but it's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. If Lukashenko goes against Putin and Russia, he's almost he will be assassinated, as his foreign secretary was fairly recently. Um, oh, do I mention Elon Musk again? Elon Musk has got involved again, saying that Yanukovych, when he was supplanted as leader, because he basically ran away from the country, Musk has called that a coup. Tim White here has done a bit of an essay on why this is nonsense and why, to help people understand. There's a few things that Musk has got involved in lately, which has not looked good. He's, I think, defended the Dilbert cartoonist as well, who's said some pretty racist remarks recently. And I don't know. I don't want to get involved in the whole doing over Elon Musk here, but like he really should just not get involved in Ukrainian stuff. Just don't make a comment on Ukraine because you almost always are supporting Russian appeasement and the Russian narrative. Here is another case of him doing that, and then all his supporters will sort of get on board with that kind of narrative, and it's not useful at all. Don't do it. Okay, now on to military aid. Poland will give, this is amazing. Poland will give another 10 Leopard 2 tanks, as well as 60 upgraded PT-91 and T-72 tanks. They are giving so much assistance to Ukraine. It's amazing. This was stated by the head of the office of the Prime Minister of Poland. Brilliant. More Leopard 2s. That's fantastic. Ukraine receives $1.25 billion of tranche out of $9.9 billion in aid from the US. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal and Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko met with US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on February the 27th and thanked her for the US financial support for Ukraine. I don't know what strings are attached there or what it's exactly for, whether it's for rebuilding or just to keep the government going at the moment. Not really sure. I have to look into the details of that. Republican critics of Ukraine often cite corruption as a reason not to give Kyiv a blank check. So this is kind of referring back to the last point of Janet Yellen and US assistance. In fact, US and the EU officials say that they have found no evidence of any foreign aid being siphoned off, and Ukraine has made real strides in fighting corruption. I refer you back to Zelenskyy doing a good job sacking people that he deems as unfit for the role. So that's really good news. It might be worth dipping into that Washington Post article that it appears that there really isn't significant siphoning off or any siphoning off of foreign aid for corruption purposes. Tokyo is freezing the assets of 39 individuals and 73 organizations from Russia, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan has announced. Again, you add all these things together, and here's the one from Belgium revisited. The Brussels Times says Belgium freezes highest amount of Russian assets of all EU countries. And I know I've got some Belgian viewers in there. Awesome. I'm not going to unless you voted that government in, you can't clap yourselves on the back. But I suppose, being Belgian, you can take corporate responsibility of Belgium's awesomeness in this regard. Because actually, interestingly, Belgium has some pretty decent arms manufacturers, but has done really very little to support Ukraine militarily. And that's more of an indictment of the state of their defense, I would say sector, but the armed forces really. they're not in a great place, Belgium, and there needs to be quite a bit of reinvestment there going on. So that's why we haven't seen that kind of activity, particularly from Belgium. But this is super useful as well. Like since, well, not as well. This is particularly useful. Since the start of the Russian war in Ukraine, the Belgian Treasury has frozen 58 billion euros worth of Russian assets, the highest amount of any EU member state, as part of the sanctions packages issued by the European Commission. The 27 EU countries agreed on the 10th on Friday night. Belgium agreed on the 10th on Friday night, agreed possibly to the 10th round of sanctions. I'm not sure what that means. Belgium has prided itself in applying these sanctions quickly and strictly. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, it has frozen 58 billion euros worth of Russian assets and blocked 191 billion euros of Russian financial transactions. Just think of the sheer volume of money not being able to be moved, being frozen. That is phenomenal. Those are Russian. That's hurting Russians and Russian people, not the general public, hopefully, so much as those oligarchs who pull the strings in Russia. In total, the measures adopted by Belgium have affected 1,789 blacklisted Russian companies or citizens, Van Petegem noted. Customs, for its part, faced a sharp increase in the number of checks on imports and exports, resulting in a total of 91,020 declarations already being checked, and 7,925 containers were also physically checked vis-à-vis Russia and Belarus, upon which sanctions have also been imposed for its involvement in the invasion. Pretty significant there. And the last thing, and this is probably the most important uh, piece of equipment, or maybe not. Actually, this could be a real dance squib because actually there's some argument that these are not good pieces of equipment, and yet they appear to be being given to Ukraine. So I don't know. It depends which side of the fence you're on in this. So it appears that the Pentagon is sending TIE fighters to Ukraine. Uh, on the one hand, these should be decent pieces of kit, but on the other hand, there's a lot of visual confirmation that these just get shot out the sky, out the atmosphere, really, just far too often. You see them spinning around. In fact, you hear them, and that breaks the laws of physics because, as we know, in space, no one can hear you scream. So there is no place for sound in space, and yet these make that very TIE fighter sound. So there's something weird going on there anyway. But the Pentagon are apparently deeming these to be the right. They won't give F-16s. They won't sanction those to be given, and yet TIE fighters are being given. And I don't know. Some people really like them, but those on the more rebellious side will tell you that they just don't do the business that they've been designed to do. And yeah. Anyway, that's today's news. Thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share. I may or may not be able to do a frontline update. We shall see. But in the meantime, take care and thanks for all your great support. And thanks for all the well wishing on my arm, which is fine when it's in this angle. Any other angle, the pain gets turned up to 11. And any of those who've got a good knowledge of spinal tap will know that turning things up to 11 has a significant effect. Anyway, that's enough nonsense. See you later. Bye.